This is a setup demonstration for the Wotofo Profile RDA. Inside the box, in addition to the RDA itself, you'll also find a screwdriver that is a Phillips head and the appropriate size for adjusting the screws on the clamps, an Allen key for swapping out the 510 pin, which I'll talk about in just a moment, a coil forming tool that you will use to form the mesh strips for installation, a standard type of coil so that you can also use this RDA with regular coils as opposed to the mesh strips. It can accommodate a single coil at a time, a baggie that will include replacement seals, replacement springs for your spring-loaded ceramic center block that supports your wicking material and keeps it exposed to the mesh, as well as spare screws for your clamps, and the replacement pin for the 510. Out of the box, pre-installed will come the squonking pin that has a hole through the center of it. If you are not using a squonking device and you're just using this like a normal RDA, you're going to want to swap that out first thing before setting it up. To demonstrate that, now I already have the solid pin installed in my device because I've already used it as a not squonking RDA. But to swap them out, you'll take your Allen key and insert it into the bottom of the gold-plated 510 pin, and go ahead and unscrew and remove the squonking pin like this. Now, since this is the solid pin, I'm just going to take the same pin and reinstall it. And so you would be replacing the squonk pin with the solid pin if you're not using a squonking device. Now I'm going to go ahead and take a device here, make sure that it is off so I don't accidentally fire it while I'm installing the mesh here, and screw the atomizer on. Now let's take a look at the build deck itself. We've got a clamp on either side with the screws holding them in position on the sides there, as well as that spring-loaded ceramic center block that supports your wicking material to keep it in contact with the mesh. I've already used the two strips that came with mine, which would also have been included in the goodies that come with the RDA. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a new one out of my tube of replacement strips that I've purchased. We sell these available separately. They come as a 10-pack. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab one of these. Oops, here we go. And they are pre-cut and measured to be the appropriate size and shape for easy installation in this RDA. So to form that, instead of having it be this flat strip, I'm going to go ahead and take the forming tool, take the wide end, and simply bend that strip around the tool, making sure that it's perpendicular so that it is bent and will be sitting straight and correctly when installed. Okay, so now that I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and take my screwdriver, which I'm going to use a separate screwdriver simply because it's a little bit easier for me to hang on to than the one that comes with the kit. Let's see here. Okay, maybe I'll just use the one that comes with it because I can't find where I set down my screwdriver. This one is perfectly sufficient, it's just that the handle's a little short. So I'm going to go ahead and loosen just ever so slightly. You don't need to loosen these screws very far to have enough space to fit that mesh in. And if you over loosen them, you can end up having the clamp fall apart and losing a portion of the clamp, which we do not have access to replacements on that for. So now you'll see that the sides of the clamp are open. And I'm going to go ahead and take my formed mesh strip and drop it down into place, making sure that the ends go and tuck down into either side of the clamp. There we go, just like so. I'm also going to make sure that the mesh strip itself is sitting level, that it is not tilted one direction or the other. Oh, and now I've just dislodged it. Let's go ahead and tuck that back in. But you want to make sure that it's not sitting crooked in either direction, that it is level. Okay, now that we've done that, you can go ahead and tighten back down the screws on the clamps. Like so. Finger tight. Now, your new device will also come with a couple of pre-cut and measured plugs of cotton. We sell these extra 10 packs. That is the amount made by Wotofo that should be sufficient for an individual wicking of this device. That being said, I've used both the plugs that came with my device, and the cotton that I currently have is some cotton bacon. I've gone ahead and pulled a plug out of my bag and reduced it down to about the amount that is going to be needed for inserting into the mesh strip here. So I'm going to, and actually I can get 2 wickings out of this length, so I'm going to cut this in half, save the other half for when it's time to re-wick. All right, and now I've got my cotton ready to go. But before we install the wicking material, we're going to go ahead and pre-fire this, make sure that the mesh is glowing evenly from the inside out and that we don't have any hot spots or kinks in the mesh. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the device back on. And I'm also going to make sure to drop my wattage down. I tend to put it down to about 13 watts or so. Okay, and I'm just going to pulse the coil here, the power to the coil. Hold down, release, and then get it starting to glow. There we are. So you can see it starts to glow from the inside and then spreads towards either end of the mesh strip. And it doesn't appear to have any hot spots or anything of that nature. So we are good to go. I'm just going to let that cool down before getting ready to install the wicking material. And while that cools for a few moments, I'm just going to clear the workspace a little bit here. In order to be able to insert the cotton wicking material, if you don't have one of the plugs that has the closed off end, sort of a shoestring style, you're going to need to compress one end of the cotton a little bit to make it narrow enough to fit it through. And this might look like too much cotton, but once the cotton has liquid applied to it, it will compress a little bit, it'll get a little thinner. And you want to make sure that even in that state, you have enough cotton to keep it nice and fluffy and make contact with all parts of the arch of that mesh strip. So I'm going to go ahead and twist this end to a point like this, just enough that I'll be able to get some of it through and grab hold of it and pull it through the rest of the way. So here we go. I'm going to go ahead and insert that, pull it through. And because that ceramic block underneath is spring-loaded, I also like to press down a little bit with the cotton and gently slide it through, just so that I'm not accidentally shifting the mesh strip at all as I pull the cotton through. There we go. Now, we can't really use it in this form. We've got to trim this wick a little bit. So you'll need your scissors to do that. I will generally, for an amount of wicking with this particular RDA, I'm going to go ahead and just trim the wicking material flush with the base of the RDA. Now, many people have different styles of trimming their wicks, so you'll find your own personal preference. For me, this ends up working the best. And making it so that I can maintain the wicking capacity and not getting dry hits at all. So for starters, there we go. We have trimmed so that the bottoms of the wicks are going to be pretty flush with the base of the build deck. And now I'm going to go ahead, and because we don't need all of this top part of the cotton draping all the way down, I'm just going to go ahead and at about a 45-degree angle, chop off the top section, like so, and clean this up a little bit on the sides. There we go. And I will do the same on the other side. Once you have your wicking material trimmed, you can go ahead and take your bent nose tweezers or whatever you have available, and then tuck that wicking material down into the juice wells of the RDA. It's important to make sure that you're not stuffing it in there too tightly and that it's still nice and fluffy. If you have the cotton too tightly compacted into the juice wells, you can end up having wicking problems. Go ahead and snug that down there. There we go. Now, before installing the side barrel, we're going to go ahead and saturate all of this wicking material. Easiest way to do that is to simply take your bottle of liquid and squeeze right on. I like to kind of paint the wicks on either side. It takes a couple of applications to get it all fully pre-saturated, especially with the amount of cotton that this RDA requires. And then you can apply some liquid directly to the top to the mesh screen there. And once you've got that fully saturated, you're ready to reassemble your RDA. You'll notice that inside the barrel, on the same side as the airflow holes are located, there are small notches on the inner diameter. Let's see if I can find a spot where you can see them. That are going to line up with the notches that are directly in front of the screws of the clamp. So you're going to want to align those and press down to get the side barrel to attach. If you're having trouble getting it to install, you may choose to take some of your liquid to lubricate the O-rings that are holding it in place. I usually find that just a good push, along with some twisting and turning to get it to align, tends to be sufficient for me. There we go. Now it's sitting flush. And then with your top cap, you have the blades on the sides that you can use to restrict the airflow in these holes on the sides. I tend to prefer it only slightly restricted, with about the top row of holes covered, and then just press that into place. Again, if you're having a hard time getting it to seat, lubricating the seal with a little bit of your e-liquid can do the trick. There we go. Oh, and now I've adjusted my airflow all the way closed, so I'm just going to fix that. There we are. Now, I have a different mouthpiece than the one that comes with it. I prefer something a little bit taller, keeping my mouth a little bit further away from the heat of the RDA. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in place. And then we can go ahead and turn up the wattage to somewhere in the range of, well, they recommend 45 to 65 watts for these mesh strips. So I'm going to turn it up to the lower end of that to get started. Got it at about 48 watts. And one final application of liquid just to make sure that liquid well is filled. Do be careful once you've dripped onto your coil and those juice wells are filled. If you tilt the device before vaping it, you can end up having liquid leaking out of your airflow holes. So after a fresh dripping, make sure to puff on it a few times before you tilt the device. And it's clocking in at 0.18 ohms, exactly as it's rated. Don't be surprised if you notice a little bit of margin of error in that. Each individual mesh strip is designed to the exact specifications, but a 0.01 ohm difference in either direction is generally something you can expect. And from there, you're ready to go ahead and start vaping away. That's just about everything you need to know for setting up the Wotofo Profile RDA. Happy vaping!